Are you smarter than Cleopatra? Now if you're thinking, what the heck does that even mean? Well, let me put it this way. Do you know how she died? Because I don't. And that's probably because whatever version of her death you think you know is wrong. But before we reveal why, one last. Can you keep a secret? Good. Because now I can tell you something that historians are still arguing about today. Some say she lost her life due to an error in judgment, while others claim it was the result of murder. But here's what's really fascinating. It wasn't just her rival queen that wanted her dead. It was also the brilliant mathematician Alan Turing. So who was he and why did he want Cleopatra dead? Well, let's go back to 1941, the year before Hitler invaded Russia. Cleopatra was no Egyptian queen, nor was Alan Turing some top-secret spy. Instead, Cleopatra was a top-secret code and Turing a cryptanalyst at Britain's code-breaking center, Bletchley Park, and both were engaged in a race against time. For the Germans had developed a new encryption machine called Enigma, and unlike previous ciphers, it was nearly impossible to crack. That's because instead of a basic alphabet, Enigma shuffled around 17 letters, all thanks to a built-in rotor that constantly mixed them up, meaning any message sent through Enigma was protected by billions of potential combinations every day. But Turing wasn't daunted. In fact, he was pretty confident that he would be able to crack the German codes. However, doing so would require an army of code breakers, countless pages of reference books, and a lot of booze. Booze? Yeah, that too. But first, let's meet the troops. There were enlisted men tasked with analyzing captured German messages and spotting patterns. And then there were the volunteers like Turing who hailed from various academic backgrounds and provided the intellectual firepower. They began sifting through the encrypted messages, and it wasn't long before they found something interesting. You see, Enigma generated its cipher based on a daily secret code, which remained the same for 24 hours. But once midnight struck, a new code replaced the old, and that meant Turing and his team didn't have much time to decipher the day's message. And so they got to work with Turing organizing teams to tackle each step of the process, from converting German characters to letters, finding the likely words that fit the jumble, and ultimately reconstructing the full message. And once they finally got to the meat of the messages, they looked for trends. After all, a message containing the word potato was far more likely to be talking about food than the latest fashion. And so over time, they began to assemble a dictionary of German phrases paired with the Enigma code. But even with the help of this crib, as it was called, the team was struggling to keep up. And that's where Alan Turing's genius kicked in. He realized that instead of trying to beat Enigma, he could trick him. The solution came to him while on a walk with his dog when he remembered a game he used to play as a child. It involved figuring out a friend's secret number by asking yes or no questions. So he wondered, could he apply the same concept to Enigma? Essentially asking the machine questions until it spat out the answer. Well, after consulting with mathematician Gordon Welchman, the idea took shape. They would build a machine that mimicked the Enigma's rotor system, except with the ability to rotate backwards. This contraption would be set to the daily code and run through the night, testing thousands of possibilities at lightning speed. Then at dawn, if it didn't find a match, the code wheels would be reset and the process would start again. In essence, Turing had just invented the world's first computer. It was called the bomb machine, made up of three main parts. There was the central processor, a series of gears that moved according to Enigma's rotation patterns. Next, there was the indicator panel displaying the current settings and the bombs. These were the rotors that mimicked Enigma's own, allowing the machine to test different combinations. However, the whole thing was controlled by a panel of switches and plugboard that dictated the machine's logic, and it was operated by a team of technicians. But despite all the moving parts, the bomb wasn't Turing's final solution. Instead, it was a stepping stone towards a machine that could do the hard work independently. This machine would consist of a perforated paper tape that held Enigma's code, and an electromechanical device that read it. But creating such a machine required a massive effort. It involved assembling a huge team, designing complex components and getting them manufactured. It also meant enlisting the support of the British government, which wasn't always smooth sailing since the officials often didn't understand the technical details and sometimes proposed impractical ideas. For example, they wanted the machine to include a whiteboard to show the progress, which, although visually appealing, wasn't necessary for the task at hand. But perhaps the biggest challenge was convincing the military that Turing's approach was worth the time and resources. After all, Enigma's codes were vital to the Germans and the stakes couldn't be higher. So under pressure from Winston Churchill himself, Turing's team raced to complete their invention before Enigma was updated to make it unbreakable. But along the way, they ran into another problem. The Germans had cleverly designed Enigma to trap would-be code breakers. If someone tried to input the wrong code 3 times, the machine would self-destruct and clear all the settings. So Turing's team needed to figure out how to bypass this safety feature. Eventually, they realized that by plugging certain wires into the machine, they could trick it into thinking the right code was in it. But doing this correctly required an expert knowledge of electronics, something that Turing's team lacked. Fortunately, they reached out to the experts who helped them pull it off. But this delay meant that the Germans had already upgraded their Enigma machines, and so the race was on again. Turing and his team worked tirelessly to create a new machine that could crack the latest codes. And in 1945, they finally succeeded. They had broken Enigma. In fact, they managed to decrypt over 80% of German naval traffic, providing valuable intelligence to the Allies. And historians agree that Turing's efforts may have shortened the war by 2 years, saving millions of lives. But that's not all. His invention paved the way for modern computers and laid the foundation for the digital age. Without Turing's genius, our world might look very different. So what happened to him? Well, after the war, Turing returned to academia, but he kept quiet about his wartime work. Sadly, he was later convicted of gross indecency for his relationship with a man, a charge that carried a prison sentence. But before he could serve his time, Turing died. Tragically, it was ruled as suicide, though some believe he was poisoned. But either way, it was a great loss for humanity. Meanwhile, Cleopatra, well, she never found out about the code breaker who wanted her dead. And that's because Enigma remained a secret for over 3 decades. So what's the big reveal? Well, Cleopatra wasn't actually the code, but rather a reference to the Enigma code. It was a top-secret project that taught us how to crack codes, build computers, and maybe, just maybe, the true story of Alan Turing. Hopefully you enjoyed this brief glimpse into history's hidden heroes. Subscribe for more. Until next time.